There are currently 20 days left until the release of the newest film in the classic slasher franchise Halloween, and being that it's almost October, I'm going to begin my horror movie reviews. During this time, I'll be reviewing some of the biggest horror series out there, such as Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, and many more. Up for review today is the original Halloween, released in 1978 and directed by John Carpenter. Halloween is easily one of my favorite horror films in existence. Its simple story, eerie tone, and slow, steady camera work all help to create a realistic and believable feeling setting that draws you into the terror that is occurring on screen. The movie was made on a small budget of only $325,000 and ended up grossing over $70 million worldwide, making it one of the most profitable films of all time. And even though Halloween wasn't the first film in the slasher genre, it is often credited as being the film that revolutionized it into what it is today. The film opens up with a shot of a pumpkin while the opening titles are happening, and a fantastic, memorable score composed by director John Carpenter plays. The main theme is arguably one of the best of all time, as it's one of, if not the most recognizable in the horror genre. We then fade to a first-person POV view from a young 6-year-old Michael Myers on Halloween night 1963. His older sister Judith Myers is fooling around with her boyfriend. Once he leaves, Michael makes his way into the kitchen where he grabs a butcher's knife to commit his first murder. He makes his way into his sister's room where he stabs her multiple times in the chest, and then makes his way downstairs where our first-person shot ends as he stands completely motionless, holding a bloodied knife while his parents stand at his side questioning him as to what has happened. This opening scene sets the tone for what's to come with the character of Michael Myers. Fast forward to October 30th, 1978, where we meet Dr. Samuel Loomis, played by late actor Donald Pleasence, Michael's psychiatrist who speaks of him as if he's an emotionless being of pure evil, whose one purpose is to kill.
He hasn't spoken a word in 15 years.
Michael ends up breaking out of the sanitarium he is held at, and makes his way back to Haddonfield, where he stalks Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode and her two high school friends. Her friends are played by actresses Nancy Kyes, who plays the witty of the three, and PJ Soles, who plays the flirty, dunce one. Laurie is completely different from her friends. She thinks smoking is gross and she isn't interested in any boys, but her friends on the other hand are pretty stereotypical, and later on, them and their boyfriends will become Michael's victims. The dialogue and acting revolving around Laurie's friends in this movie is nothing special, as PJ Soles repeatedly says totally.
At 5 and the dance is at 8. I'll be totally wiped out.
I don't think you have enough to do tomorrow.
Totally.
And many times their acting comes across as corny. Jamie Lee Curtis, however, plays a nice, likable babysitter in the movie. This film was what jump-started her into stardom. Her mother, Janet Leigh, was already a huge actress, appearing as a major role in her own horror films such as Psycho. And her father, Tony Curtis, was also a huge name in Hollywood, appearing in movies like Spartacus and many more. But this was the first role for Jamie, and she even came back to play the character in 3 of the film's sequels and is returning once again for the next installment in the series, releasing in just under a month. But the spotlight is all on veteran actor Donald Pleasence as Sam Loomis. He's easily given the best lines in the movie, and his delivery is always on point as a man who is genuinely afraid of the evil that is Michael Myers.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes. The devil's eyes.
The rest of the movie is all about Michael stalking Laurie and attempting to kill her and her friends on the same night he killed his sister 15 years prior. By today's standards, Halloween might not be the scariest film out there, but there's no denying how well John Carpenter builds up suspense in this movie by having little things like Michael's mask slowly appear from the darkness before he strikes his victims. And unlike Friday the 13th, which is a series that is all about the campiness and extremely graphic kills, Halloween hardly ever shows any blood. Only 5 people are killed in this movie, one of them being off-screen altogether. As I've said before, this movie was more about the build-up of suspense before the kills themselves, and not just how graphic what happens is. This is of course changed in the sequels, as audiences loved the gruesome style of the original Friday the 13th, and Halloween had no choice but to adapt to this in order to keep up with the times. The setting of the film also really helps. Director John Carpenter and producer Deborah Hill purposely chose the small, beautiful neighborhood in California as the filming location for the fictional town they wanted to create, known as Haddonfield, Illinois. They wanted the stereotypical neighborhood to be the setting, as it's the last place you'd expect such horrible tragedies to occur. But it does nothing but work towards the effectiveness of the film. The scene that highlights the suspense would definitely be the chase at the end, which involves Laurie running all over the neighborhood and back into the house, where she'll countlessly defeat Michael only for him to rise up again. The soundtrack is also terrific. Halloween has, in my opinion, the best soundtrack in a horror movie. It's all done on the piano and composed by the film's director. The music here is simple, but very memorable and effective. Now let's talk about the killer himself. Michael Myers has always been my favorite killer in a horror movie. He's so simple in the sense that he never talks or runs. The only thing we ever hear from him is his breathing. This is used many times throughout the movie to add to the thrills. His mask is also one of the most iconic in horror. Originally, it was a cheap mask designed to look like William Shatner as Captain Kirk from Star Trek. They ended up removing the sideburns and bleaching the mask white, thus creating the face of one of the most recognizable characters in horror history. Michael is also hardly given a motive. All we know about him is that he killed his sister and that he is believed to be the embodiment of pure evil. Director John Carpenter purposely chose to make the character this way, as he believed the less you knew about Michael, the more terrifying he became. This of course changed over the history of the films, as the sequel introduced the idea that Laurie was the younger sister of Michael, and eventually in the 6th film the Thorn Cult was brought in, even further developing backstory for the character. But many fans believe this didn't work, thus proving John Carpenter correct in the idea that sometimes more is equal to less. The only real problem I have with the film is that it can sometimes be a little bit slow during the first 40 minutes, and like I said earlier, the dialogue can be downright awful at times. I've probably seen this movie around 5 or 6 times since I first watched it when I was going through my huge horror phase back in 2013, and it's pretty much become a tradition to watch this every year around October. As I said earlier, Halloween is not only a great suspenseful thriller, it's also the film that made the slasher subgenre what it is today, spawning countless imitations and sequels that all have never managed to reach the greatness of the original. I'm going to give Halloween an A. I hope you all enjoyed this first entry in my Halloween horror series review. Again, I'll be reviewing tons of horror films over the course of this month, so if you guys have any suggestions for films you'd like to hear my thoughts on, comment below, and as always, I'll see you all next time.